On the day my husband was buried, I was thrown out of his own funeral. There was no warning, no compassion, not even a moment of silence. There was only the harsh sound of my daughter-in-law's voice, Vivian Hill Whitmore, her heels striking the floor like a judge's gavel, and the cold stare of my eldest son, Alexander Whitmore, as if I were an intruder and not the woman who gave half her life to building that family. I can still hear exactly what she said, like an echo that refuses to fade. Get her out of here, now. This woman has no place at this funeral. She is a public disgrace. People turned away. Some pretended not to notice. Others stepped back as if I carried a contagious disease. And there I stood, 71 years old, newly widowed, my hands trembling around the bouquet of white lilies I had bought myself because no one even thought to prepare flowers for me. Alexander, my son, why? I whispered, my voice cracking. He didn't raise his eyes, not once, not for a single second. He only said, through clenched teeth, you shouldn't be here, Mother, leave, Mother, a word delivered like, Mother, a word delivered like an insult. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air had vanished from the entire world. I stayed silent for years. Today, my voice is finally free. Please subscribe to Buried by Family, so no woman ever has to fight alone again. Now, let me tell you what they tried to bury. People around me whispered, what did she do? Oh God, how humiliating. Imagine being rejected at your own husband's funeral. Public shame is a fire that burns from the outside in. It's a slow death, and the worst part is when it hurts more than the death you're burying. 2 security guards walked toward me. Yes, they had hired guards to make sure I wouldn't be there. At the funeral of the man with whom I shared 52 years of my life, they grabbed my arms as if I were a criminal. My body was dragged away, stumbling, almost falling down the church steps, and as I struggled to stay upright, I heard Vivian say loud enough for everyone to hear, that's what happens when someone tries to steal from a decent family. She only wants money. Not even her dead husband could stand to live with that woman. Stifled laughs, twisted lips, eyes sharp as blades. I felt something inside me break, but the final blow came right after. Cruel as a knife slipped between ribs without warning. The will is being read in an hour, and you are not invited. My heart stopped. My blood froze. My world collapsed. All I managed to whisper was, I am his wife. Vivian looked at me as if stepping on an insect. You are, until he learned who you really are, and with one last shove, the guards pushed me out through the main doors. Suddenly, I was on the sidewalk, alone, a thin snow beginning to fall. Crushed flowers held against my chest. That was how what should have been my last goodbye ended. I didn't know it yet, but that cruel spectacle had a purpose. They were hiding something, something big, something that would turn that public humiliation into a scandal no one would ever forget. And when the attorney came running toward me, his face as white as paper, he said words that changed everything. Eleanor, you need to come inside, now. The will must be read with you present. Your husband left specific instructions. Without you, nothing is valid. I turned slowly. He looked nervous, breathless. Harold Garrison, the family's attorney for more than 30 years, always impeccable, always neutral. But not that day. Even his tie seemed to shake. They threw me out, Harold, I said, surprised at the strength in my own voice. Your perfect client, my perfect daughter-in-law, ordered security to drag me outside, and my son watched. He swallowed hard. I know, I saw. It was unacceptable. I gave a short laugh, one without a trace of humor. Unacceptable, I repeated. Unacceptable is being betrayed by your own blood. This was just confirmation. He looked at me like someone handling a bomb about to explode. Eleanor, listen to me. If you don't go in there, everything changes. Everything Edgar planned. My heart tightened at the sound of my husband's name, Edgar Whitmore. For a moment, pain sliced through the fury. Did he leave something for me? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Or are you only here because you need my signature to hand everything over to them? Harold took a deep breath. Your husband left specific instructions and a letter, one that can only be opened with you present. And he was clear. If the widow is not at the reading, the will is invalid and everything goes to court. Silence. The snow was falling lightly, gathering on the step. Inside, I could still hear the organ, the murmured prayers, the sermon about a family united in grief. And then a fire rose inside me. They had thrown me out, called me a disgrace, treated me like trash. And now, suddenly, I was necessary. So here's what we're going to do, Harold, I said, lifting my chin. You're going in with me, through the front door, and whoever lays a hand on me again is leaving in handcuffs. Understood? His eyes widened. Eleanor, maybe we should wait until the funeral ends. We don't want to. I do, I cut in. They humiliated me publicly. Now they can choke on it publicly. Let's go. I tossed the crushed flowers into the trash can beside the steps, straightened my coat, took a deep breath, and climbed the first stair. Each step was a decision. I would no longer beg for a place in a world I helped build. The church doors were almost closed, just a sliver of warm light spilling through. I pushed both doors wide open. The sound echoed through the hall. The priest stopped speaking. The organ went silent. Heads turned all at once. For a moment, the whole world moved in slow motion. I saw it, the dark, elegant wooden casket in the center of the room, surrounded by enormous floral arrangements someone had ordered on behalf of the Whitmore family, the family I supposedly no longer belonged to. The rows of chairs filled with familiar faces, neighbors, Edgar's business partners, people who once ate at my table, drank my wine, laughed at my stories, and in the front row, Alexander, my firstborn, rigid, his jaw locked, Elliot, the youngest, staring down at the floor. And between them, like a queen sitting on a stolen throne, Vivian, my daughter, loring a tight black dress, far too indecent for a funeral, her eyes dripping poison. I felt the air slice against my skin. Harold stopped a step behind me, swallowing hard. What is she doing here again? I heard someone whisper. Vivian was the first to stand. Of course she was. She turned slightly, making sure everyone could see her flawless profile, her chestnut hair pulled into a perfect chignon, and the discreet yet obscenely expensive necklace around her throat. Security, she shouted, pointing at me. I told you to remove this woman. This is a funeral, not a circus. I took one step forward. Nice try, Vivian, I said, loud enough to echo all the way to the altar. But if anyone here is turning this into a circus, it isn't me. A murmur rippled across the room. The priest cleared his throat, uneasy. The security guards hesitated. Harold rushed ahead, flustered. Please, gentlemen, do not touch Mrs. Whitmore. She's the ex-wife, Vivian snapped, venom dripping from every syllable. Legally, socially, and morally. I smiled, a smile without joy. Would you like me to show my marriage certificate? I asked, because, as far as I'm aware, I never signed any divorce papers, darling. A few guests stifled nervous laughs. Vivian stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with hatred. You should never have come. Edgar couldn't stand you anymore. He had told you that before or after spending more than 50 years by my side. I cut in. Or is this just your revised version of history now that his heart has stopped and he can't defend himself? She froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of hesitation. A flash of fear. And I realized she was bluffing. She always had been. Alexander finally stood. My son. The boy who once clung to the hem of my dress because he was scared to cross the street. Now looking at me as if I were a legal inconvenience. Mom, please, don't do this. Don't do this, I repeated. You dragged me out of my own husband's funeral in front of the entire town, Alexander. You let two men pull me away like a thief, and now you want me to not do this. He narrowed his eyes, irritated. You know exactly why we did it, do I asked, folding my arms. Then do me a favor, my son. Explain. Explain to the priest, to the guests, to your father's business partners, to your grandmother's neighbors. Explain, out loud, what I did that was so terrible, it justifies treating me like a criminal. Silence fell heavy. No one wanted to be there, but no one wanted to miss the spectacle either. Vivian spoke in a low voice, but the microphone was still on, capturing every poisoned word with perfect clarity. You stole. You manipulated Edgar. You wanted to take the inheritance that belongs to his sons. You destroyed this family. Oh, here we go. I lifted my chin. Stole? I asked slowly. Vivian, sweetheart, if anyone here knows about money magically disappearing, it isn't me. But be careful. Often the one screaming thief is the one terrified someone might do the math correctly. She went pale. Harold cleared his throat anxiously. Please, ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm here is extremely serious. Mr. Edgar Whitmore left written instructions, attached to his will. And the will is to be read only with family, Alexander interrupted. This isn't a courtroom. Harold. I straightened my shoulders. It's a funeral, Alexander. And even so, you decided to turn it into the stage for your cowardice. So here's what we'll do. Since you turned my grief into a show, we'll finish the performance. I looked at Harold. Tell everyone why you called me back, Harold. He took a deep breath, looked at the altar, then at the casket, as if asking the dead man for permission. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Edgar Whitmore specified, in writing, that the reading of his will must take place today, right after the funeral, here, in the presence of those who witnessed his public life. And he declared that the document is invalid if his legal wife, Eleanor Whitmore, is not present and recognized as such. A collective gasp traveled through the church. I didn't move. Inside, my heart was at war. Edgar, what did you do? Vivian let out a nervous laugh. This is absurd. He was sick, confused. He was lucid until his last day, and you know it, I replied, not breaking eye contact. Harold went on. There is also a letter, sealed, addressed to Eleanor on the front, and on the back, an instruction, to be read aloud if the truth is denied in her presence. My stomach twisted. Edgar knew. He knew they would try to erase me. He knew they would try to rewrite his story once he was gone. And he left a bomb in the lawyer's hands. I took a deep breath. Then read it, Harold, I said. Before someone gets the brilliant idea to make this letter disappear too, Vivian exploded. You're not turning this into some dramatic soap opera to paint yourself as the victim, Eleanor. I didn't turn anything into anything, I answered. Steady. You did, when you had me dragged out of the church like trash. Now deal with the consequences. I'm done being silent. It's over. Harold pulled the envelope from the inside pocket of his blazer. A simple, cream-colored envelope, with Edgar's handwriting on the front. Firm, elegant, the same handwriting that once wrote our names together, on the door of the first house we ever lived in, to Eleanor. My heart ached. Harold opened it slowly, unfolded the paper carefully. His voice came out slightly shaky at first, then he cleared his throat and read louder, so everyone could hear. Eleanor, if this letter is being read, it means I can no longer speak for myself. And knowing the nature of certain people around me, it's likely they're trying to do to you what they tried to do while I was alive, silence you. Some guests looked away. Vivian crossed her arms, rolled her eyes, but I saw her hand tremble. Harold continued, I made mistakes, many, including being too weak at times, giving in to manipulation, closing my eyes when I should have slammed my fist on the table. But one thing I will not allow, not even dead, is for you to be treated like an easy target. You have been my wife for 52 years. You helped build every brick of this family, saved companies, survived crises. You carried burdens that were my fault, and still stayed. If anyone dares call you a gold digger, a thief, or a disgrace, they are spitting on the truth of my life. My face burned, not with shame, but with a mix of pain and fury. I heard someone sob in the third row. Someone else wiped tears. Harold read the next part. If our sons are there, I want them to listen carefully. The inheritance they are now fighting over exists only because their mother held everything together when I fell apart. When I wanted to sell everything, she was the one who insisted we start over. When I wanted to give up, she was the one who forced me out of bed. I looked at Alexander. He couldn't look at me. He stared at the floor. Vivian bit her lower lip, furious. If anyone tries to remove my wife from the funeral, or from the reading of the will, Harold paused, breathed in, then continued, know that they will be disrespecting not only her, but my final wish. And I, Edgar Whitmore, leave nothing, absolutely nothing to anyone who chooses cruelty and ingratitude. A wave of whispers swept through the church. Repeat that, I said, staring at Harold, out loud, without stuttering. He repeated, firm this time, I, Edgar Whitmore, leave nothing, absolutely nothing to anyone who chooses cruelty and ingratitude. Silence. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the side wall. You could hear Alexander's heavy breathing. Harold turned the page. As for the will itself, I know many expect most of it to go to my sons. I love them. But love is not an automatic reward. Inheritance is not a right, it is a consequence. For that reason, I leave the entirety of my personal assets, including the home I shared with my wife, investment funds, and stocks, to her, Eleanor Whitmore. She will decide what to do with every cent. The world became a hum. I had to hold on to the pew beside me to keep from losing my balance. I watched Vivian's face twist. This is a lie, she screamed, stepping forward. He wouldn't do that. He loved his sons. He loves his sons. I know that. I replied, still trying to process, but it seems he finally understood that love doesn't mean letting people walk all over me. Alexander exploded. Harold, is this some sort of scam? Did she pay you? Careful, Alexander, I said, calm but with a razor's edge. Accusing a lawyer of falsifying a will in front of the entire town is a kind of stupidity even I didn't expect from you. Harold raised the document. This was drafted, registered, and signed in the presence of 2 independent witnesses, along with a recorded video that is also in my custody. If you doubt it, I can present it in court, including the recording in which Mr. Whitmore mentions, by name, the behaviors of each person. Vivian went pale. What behaviors? She asked, her voice breaking for the first time. I stepped forward. Why don't you tell them, Vivian? I asked, staring straight into her eyes. Or would you prefer the entire town see the video where you call your father-in-law a senile old man, who's easy to manipulate, and say that once he died, you'd finally get that old woman, meaning me, out of the way? Her eyes widened. A ripple of shock moved through the church like a gust of wind. You don't have that. Not me, I said. The lawyer does. And now everyone knows. Elliot, my youngest son, finally stood. Mom, this can't be right. Dad would never. He never said he was going to. Of course he didn't, I said, looking at him with a deep, old hurt. Because if he had, you all would have started betraying me sooner. At least you waited until he died to drop the mask. He looked like he'd been slapped. I never betrayed you. You watched them drag me out of the church and did nothing, I shot back. You heard them call me a disgrace, a gold digger. Did you open your mouth to defend me? He opened it, but no sound came out. Exactly. I looked at all 3 of them. Alexander, stiff face red with anger. Elliot, shattered inside but still a coward. Vivian on the edge of exploding. You wanted to erase me from Edgar's story, I said. You wanted me to watch from the sidewalk while the perfect family pretended to mourn and divided what he left behind. Well, now you will watch a different scene. I'm staying. I pointed toward the casket. And out of respect for the man lying in there, the rest of this ceremony will continue. Whoever can't behave is free to leave. Today, I'm not going anywhere. A heavy silence fell. The priest finally mustered the courage. Perhaps we should all take a breath. And Father, I interrupted gently but firmly, please continue the service. Whoever wants to stay, stays. Whoever wants to leave, may leave. I am going to say goodbye to my husband, the right way, with the truth on the table. I sat in the front row, exactly where I should have been from the beginning. No one dared try to remove me again. Vivian, furious, whispered something into Alexander's ear. He just shook his head, tense. The ceremony went on for another 20 minutes, but it no longer felt like a funeral. It was a silent battlefield. When it finally ended, people stood up one by one, unsure whether they should come hug me or pretend it was safer not to know me. Some approached. A longtime neighbor, Margaret Doyle, wrapped me in a tight embrace. They crossed the line. Eleanor, I saw everything. If you need a witness, I'll be the first. I just held her hand. Thank you, Margaret. I don't even know where to begin. But I did know. The beginning would be refusing to stay silent ever again. Because if there's one thing that day taught me, it's this. When a family decides to bury you before the coffin is even closed, you either accept the grave they offer, or you stand up, throw dirt back at them, and make everyone see who's really filthy. I had spent a lifetime lowering my head. After that funeral, I would never bow again. And the war over the inheritance had only just begun. The moment the ceremony ended, the air grew heavy, dense, almost solid. No one knew where to look. No one knew which side to stand on. Some pretended to search for something in their bags. Others fussed with their coats. Others simply fled without turning back, as if the ground were about to split open. I stayed seated, watching the flowers on the casket, lilies, roses, greenery, all so beautiful on the surface, just like our family had been once. Harold approached slowly. Eleanor, I know this was difficult, but we need to talk, immediately. I took a breath. I figured. He looked around, uncomfortable. Vivian and Alexander were whispering with the security guard. Elliot watched from a distance, visibly shaken. Can you come with me to the family house? The rest of the documents are there. I would have laughed if it didn't hurt so much. The question is, will they let me in? Harold swallowed hard. The house is legally yours now. They don't have to let anything. I slipped my purse over my shoulder and stood. Then let's show them how a door works when the key changes owners. The mansion was 15 minutes from the church. Willow Creek, the old, traditional neighborhood where everyone knew everything about everyone, and every facade gleamed like a postcard. 42 years in that house, 42 Christmases, 42 birthdays, 3 births, 2 surgeries, 1 death, and now, a war. When Harold's car stopped at the iron gate, 3 black SUVs were already parked out front. Son's daughter, private security. Alexander stood at the top of the marble steps, arms crossed, bracing for attack. Vivian beside him, immaculate as always, but with eyes full of pure hatred and fear, hiding in the cracks. Elliot stood 1 step behind, unsure where he belonged. As soon as I stepped out of the car, Vivian moved forward as if she owned the place. "You're not coming in here. Not today." I stopped in front of her, looked straight into her eyes, didn't blink. "Step aside, Vivian. This isn't your war to win, and it definitely isn't your house." She laughed, one of those laughs from people who win by volume, not truth. That little performance at the funeral might have worked on the crowd, but not on me. "You forged something, manipulated Edgar while he was weak, but I won't let you ruin everything. You're not stepping foot in here." I stepped forward. We were just inches apart. I could smell her perfume, sweet, excessive, suffocating. Perfume people use to hide the stench of their own rot. "I think you didn't understand, darling," I said, my voice calm and venomous. "You don't have the power to allow or forbid anything. Edgar put everything in writing. Harold has every document, and if you try to physically block me from entering my own house, that becomes a crime. And you become tomorrow's headline." A security guard approached. Alexander raised a hand to make him step back, not out of respect, but out of fear of a scandal. "Mom, let's handle this calmly." I laughed, firm. "You want calm now, Alexander? After you had security drag me out of the church like garbage? .com is no longer on the menu, sweetheart." His fists tightened. "You know why we did it?" "No, I know the excuse you're going to invent." "Not the truth." Vivian exploded, exactly as I expected. "The truth is, you destroyed this family. You were always weak, always a burden Edgar had to carry. Everything he built was despite you, not because of you. You're a disgrace, and you always have been." I felt my blood boil. I took a deep breath and gave it right back. "A disgrace. Disgrace Vivian is a woman who never built anything on her own and lives off others like a parasite. Disgrace is someone who thinks she's a queen without ever planting a single seed. Disgrace is manipulating children against their own mother out of greed and jealousy. And the biggest disgrace of all is putting a man in a coffin and still trying to control his life after he's dead." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Alexander tried to intervene. "That's enough. Mom, just come inside and we'll talk in there." "Come inside, nothing. I don't need an invitation." I looked at Harold. "Open the gate." He entered the code. The gate opened with a metallic groan, as if it knew that sound marked the start of a war. I climbed the steps slowly, feeling victory in every step. Vivian tried to block my path with her body. I looked at her the way you look at an obstacle, not a person. "If you lay one finger on me, you'll be leaving this house in the trunk of a police cruiser. Decide quickly. Do you want a civil war or a crumb of dignity?" She froze, and I walked in, through the front door, of the house I built, the house they tried to throw me out of, the house that was now mine, alone. The door shut behind me with a boom that felt like an earthquake, and everything inside me screamed, "Now it begins." Walking into that house, after everything, felt like stepping onto a silent battlefield. The walls seemed to remember every unspoken word, every hidden tear, every scar no one wanted to admit existed. The main room was exactly as I had left it, the last night before Edgar died, the fireplace lit, his armchair with the blue blanket folded over the side, the picture frame with the photo from our 50th anniversary, the one Vivian hated because I was smiling next to him, as if the whole world belonged to me. She always said I looked too proud. I always said it was just happiness. But happiness is an animal that dies easily when someone poisons the air. Harold came in behind me, holding the folder of documents like he was carrying explosives. Vivian, Alexander, and Elliot entered soon after but stopped a few feet away, as if getting too close to me might burn them. I walked to the fireplace, touched the warm wood, breathed deeply. "All right, if you want to talk, we'll talk. No yelling, no theatrics, just truth." I sat in Edgar's armchair, deliberately. to provoke, to claim territory, to remind them that I was still where I had always been, at the center of the story. Vivian scoffed. You have no respect. For what? Because you miss your borrowed throne. She crossed her arms. Edgar was going to change the will. He told me. He said he regretted putting everything under your control. He didn't trust you anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so that's why you're so desperate. Because you promised the world to your parents. Because you were already planning how much you'd sell the house for. Or because you already spent part of the money before knowing whether it would actually be yours. Her expression shifted. Suddenly, panic in fractions of a second. I smiled slowly, like a blade being sharpened. That's right, Vivian. I know everything, including the $280,000 you pulled from Edgar's company without formal authorization. The one you labeled as an emergency investment, but that, curiously, was transferred to an account in Nevada under the name Everton Hale. Ring a bell. The panic turned to desperation. Vivian stepped forward. You invaded my privacy. No, the bank opened its mouth when your transactions were flagged during the internal audit. An audit Edgar himself requested 2 months before he died. He was investigating you, sweetheart. And guess what? It's all documented, with certified copies. Would you like to see the receipt? I nodded to Harold, who placed several sealed envelopes with gold seals on the table, the kind used for heavy legal material. Alexander turned pale. Vivian, is this true? She didn't answer. She couldn't. I leaned forward, staring straight into her eyes. So tell me, Vivian, do you still want to talk about who destroyed this family? Silence. Elliot stood up, caught between indignation and shock. Is this real? You stole from Dad. Vivian turned to him like someone glaring at a dog. He owed me. I did everything for this family. Your mother was always a burden. I slammed my hand on the table, firm. Don't talk to me like I'm dead. Don't talk to me like I'm not standing right here. Don't talk to me like I'm weak. I am very much alive. And you are very much screwed, Alexander exploded. I don't believe Dad left everything to you. He wouldn't do that. You think I'm not asking myself the same thing, I said, facing him directly. I want to know what happened in those last months too. Because you and your wife did everything you could to keep me away from Edgar when he got sick. And I want to understand why. He hesitated. Guilt has a strong smell. And in that moment, the entire room reeked of fear. We were trying to protect Dad. He was fragile. You were. I was. What, Alexander? Say it. Look at me and tell me what you think I was. He took a deep breath, but his voice came out weak. You were draining him. You two fought. He said that, Elliot cut in, his voice breaking. I need to say something. Everyone turned to him. He was shaking. He looked like he was carrying a truth too heavy for a young man. I overheard a conversation, one you two had with Dad, at the hospital. What? Alexander spun toward him, furious. Elliot, shut up. You were threatening him. You said that if he didn't remove Mom from the will, you were going to push him out of the company and expose a scandal that would ruin his name forever. Silence fell like an explosion with no sound. Vivian turned purple. You're making this up, Elliot shouted. I was behind the door. I heard everything. You said you'd have him committed, that you'd declare him mentally unfit if he didn't sign the papers you brought. Alexander lunged forward, grabbing his brother's arm. You're going to regret this, Elliot. I stood from Edgar's chair, steel in my spine. Take your hand off him now, Alexander. He froze. There was something in my voice, something that allowed no choice. He released his brother. Then, I spoke, slowly, weighing every syllable like a sentence. So that's it. You tried to hijack your own father's mind and manipulate a dying man to get money. And when he didn't give in when he made a will, you never imagined he'd mack you, decided to destroy me publicly. Vivian spat venom. You'll never prove any of this. I smiled. I don't need to. Edgar already did. I picked up the envelope Harold had given me. Inside here is the full recording, made by Edgar himself, with date, time, and witnesses. And if you threaten me again, I swear I'll put this everywhere online, in the press, and let the whole country see who you really are. Vivienne stepped back. You wouldn't do that. You're not that kind of person. I wasn't. I looked straight into her eyes, but you made sure I learned to be. At that moment, I knew. It wasn't grief anymore. It was war. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about history, identity, dignity. And I wasn't going to lose. Because there's a kind of woman who, once awakened, makes the world tremble. And that day, I woke up, and the emotional revenge hadn't even begun. The day after the funeral, I woke up to my phone ringing nonstop, 3 missed calls, 5 text messages, notifications shooting up the screen like machine gun fire. I was still in the master bed door, what had become an enormous, painfully empty bed. Edgar's side was still perfectly made, the pillow shaped by the last imprint of his face. I still didn't have the courage to touch it. I grabbed my phone with no idea the war had already erupted outside. The first message I saw was from Margaret Doyle, my lifelong neighbor. "Eleanor, have you seen this? It's everywhere. Don't leave the house. I'm calling you." Below it, a link, then another, and another, and another. The headline repeated over and over: "Inheritance dispute turns funeral into battleground. Leaked video shocks town." My heart raced. I sat up slowly, clicked, and there I was, recorded by someone inside the church. Clear footage, crisp audio, Vivian screaming that I was a public disgrace, security dragging me out, Alexander yelling at me, and the exact moment Harold read Edgar's letter, the long passage: "I, Edgar Whitmore, leave nothing, absolutely nothing, to anyone who chooses the path of cruelty and ingratitude." And then whoever recorded it, I don't know, but it was brilliant. The moment I said, "Inheritance isn't a right. Inheritance is a consequence," that line had gone viral. The video already had 128,000 views. In just 14 hours, comments exploded across the screen. I've never felt so angry watching a video in my life. How can someone treat their mother like that? When the child becomes the monster, the mother becomes the hero. This woman deserves justice. Hashtag Team Eleanor. And the most shocking part, women from all over the country were sharing the video with their own stories. "My daughter humiliated me like this when my husband died. My son kicked me out of the company when I became a widow. There is no pain worse than being betrayed by your own children." I placed my hand over my chest. I felt the earth shift. It was no longer just about me. I had become a symbol. Then the phone rang again. I answered. "Hello?" My voice came out shaky. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Jessica Monroe from WCTN News. We're covering the case and we'd like you for a live interview. People want to hear your side." I froze for a few seconds. An interview, live, in the middle of a national scandal. I took a breath. Why would I talk to the press? Because your story is inspiring people. And because if you don't speak, your sons will. And they'll try to control the narrative. Do you want to let them do that again? The question sliced my throat like a blade. I closed my eyes, and I saw the funeral scene again, like a movie burned into my skin. I knew the answer. "When is the interview?" "Today, 7 p.m. live, in the studio, Eleanor. The whole country will be watching." I closed the phone and stayed silent for a moment. Then I spoke to myself, not in a whisper, but in a voice, full and steady. "The time for silence is over. Now I speak." Before I even got up, I heard voices outside. I went to the window. The street was packed with reporters, cameras, neighbors, curious onlookers, news vans, and drones circling overhead like vultures. And in the middle of the chaos, Vivian and Alexander walked down the front steps trying to give a statement. Vivian spoke fast, dramatic, fake tears in her eyes. "We are devastated. My father-in-law was a good man. This woman manipulated him. This is all a cruel lie." I felt something boil inside me and then spill over. Without thinking, I walked to the door. And when I opened it, every camera swung toward me, a storm of light. Silence fell, heavy. Recorded. I walked down slowly, step by step. No rush, no fear. When I reached the gate, I lifted my chin and spoke to the reporters, looking directly into the cameras, knowing exactly who I was really speaking to. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I will not allow my story to be turned into a lie. At my husband's funeral, I was dragged out like garbage, but I am not garbage, and no woman deserves to be treated this way ever. Tonight at 7, on WCTN, I will tell the whole truth, not for revenge, for justice. And if anyone wants to silence me, let them try. I don't run anymore. I don't bow anymore. I don't ask for permission anymore." I watched Vivian turn pale. I watched Alexander lose his footing. And then I finished, looking straight into the lens. Inheritance isn't money. Inheritance is dignity. And dignity isn't begged for, it's claimed. The cameras went wild. The crowd applauded. The world listened. And at that moment, I felt the war had shifted. The board had turned. I was no longer alone. I had a nation behind me. But I didn't yet know. The person who leaked that video wasn't a stranger. It was someone from my own house. Someone holding a much bigger secret. Someone who was about to change everything. After the reporters were pushed back by street security, the front door slammed shut behind me, shaking the house to its foundation. The silence inside the mansion wasn't peace. It was the heavy, sharp, suffocating kind. The silence before an earthquake. I stood still for a few seconds, breathing hard, heart pounding like a hammer in my chest. The echo of my own words at the gate still vibrated through the walls. Dignity isn't begged for, it's claimed. But before I could process any of it, I heard footsteps behind me. I posted it. I turned slowly. It was Elliot, my youngest son. The boy born 2 months premature who almost didn't survive. The boy with a heart too soft and a fear too big. The boy who grew up in his brother's shadow, believing he had to shrink to fit. Now he stood there shaking, pale, but steady. Alexander exploded instantly. You did what? Elliot didn't look away from me. It was me, Mom. I recorded it at the funeral. And I sent the video to the press. Vivian went red, then purple, then white. Traitor, she screamed. Elliot stepped forward, facing her for the first time without fear. I didn't betray anyone. I just showed what really happened. If you're so worried about the truth coming out, maybe the problem isn't the video. Maybe the problem is what you did. Alexander spun toward him in fury, jabbing a finger in his face. You destroyed our family. Elliot took a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, he raised his voice. Our family was already destroyed. You two just buried the body. Silence. Complete silence. My eyes burned, but I didn't let a single tear fall. Not then. Why, Elliot? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He turned to me, and in that moment, he looked both impossibly young and impossibly grown. Because I saw everything, Mom. I saw how they treated you. I saw how they spoke to Dad when he was sick. I heard the threats. I heard them say they were going to finish you. I stayed quiet because I was scared, and when Dad died, I realized that if I kept quiet, I'd become just like them. I don't want to be like them, Mom. Vivian lunged forward like a snake, ready to strike. You're worthless. You always were. You'll pay for this. I stepped in front of him, my body a wall. Come 1 inch closer to him, Vivian, and I swear on everything sacred you will never set foot in this house again. Alexander let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. You think this ends here? You'll regret turning all this against us. That interview won't save you. I walked toward him slowly, until we were faced. Alexander, my son, you still don't understand. I spoke low, almost a whisper, but my voice cut like a blade. I'm not trying to save anything. What could be saved, you already destroyed. I'm trying to bury what you killed: your honor, your respect for your father, the truth. Now, either you start telling me what you're hiding, or I promise you, I have a lot more to show. And the next bomb won't be pretty. He went pale. His breath faltered. You don't know what you're talking about. I raised the still-sealed envelope, the one Harold had given me, that I hadn't opened yet. Are you sure? Alexander froze. Vivian stepped back 2 paces. Elliot watched with an expression torn between fear and expectation. Harold approached discreetly and spoke softly, only to me. Eleanor, this letter is different from the others. Edgar asked that you only open it when you were ready. There may be something very heavy in there. I took a deep breath. Heavy. Heavier than being thrown out of the funeral of the man I loved. Heavier than being called trash by my own family. Heavier than the silence that hollowed me out for years. I slid my finger under the seal. And at that exact moment, Alexander shouted, "Don't open that letter." Dead silence. Everyone frozen. Everyone watching. Vivian ran to him and hissed desperately, "Alexander, shut up, for God's sake." But he had already said too much. Words are ammunition, and that one had been fired. I pressed the envelope to my chest. What's inside this, Alexander? He closed his eyes, painfully. Things that don't need to come out. Is it about me? About your father? About you? About money? About betrayal? He stayed quiet. Too quiet. Quiet enough to be an answer. And then Elliot spoke in a low voice, like someone speaking of a ghost. It's about the past, isn't it? About what happened before I was born. Vivian dropped Alexander's arm like it was on fire. Elliot, you don't know what you're talking about. He ignored her. It's about that woman, the one no one was allowed to mention. My blood froze. Yes, I knew exactly what he meant. A name buried for decades. A forbidden name. A name I spent my life trying to forget. And in that moment, I knew the real bomb wasn't the inheritance. The real bomb was the truth. I closed my eyes and said a sentence that felt like a verdict. It's time to resurrect what you tried to kill. And I tore the envelope open. When I ripped open the envelope, the sound felt like thunder. The silence that followed wasn't silence, it was a warning. Inside were two things: a handwritten letter from Edgar, on older paper, the ink slightly faded, and a photograph. And before I read a single line, the photo hit me like a punch to the stomach. Edgar, 40 years younger, holding a newborn baby in his arms. And beside him, a woman I would recognize, even after 100 years. Helena Price, the name I buried. The forbidden name. The name no one was allowed to speak. My knees nearly buckled, but I didn't fall. I breathed, held the photo tight, like gripping a weapon and a memory at the same time. Vivian covered her mouth, horrified. Alexander stepped back. Elliot simply closed his eyes, as if everything finally made sense. I opened the letter. Edgar's handwriting was strong, as it had always been. I read it aloud because now nothing would be hidden. My dear Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer there to hold your hand. And that hurts. It hurts more than any illness ever could. I spent my last months trying to find the courage to say what I never had the courage to admit in life. But I failed. And you deserve, above all, the truth. Before Elliot was born, before we rebuilt our family, I made an unforgivable mistake. I had an affair with Helena Price. Those words sliced through me like shattered glass. I already knew. Of course I knew. A woman always knows. But knowing in the dark is one thing. Seeing the truth lit up in front of everyone is another. And I kept reading. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't brief. It wasn't insignificant. I fell in love with her. And she became pregnant. The baby in the photo is mine. Ours. He was stillborn. My heart shattered like porcelain thrown against the floor. Helena had gone into premature labor. The baby didn't survive. She almost died with him. I remembered that year. I remembered Edgar's sudden coldness. I remembered the nights he cried in his office when he thought I was asleep. And now I knew why. I continued, my voice cracking for the first time. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid, ashamed. A coward. You discovered part of it, and we almost separated. But then we stayed silent, pretended, tried to move on, but someone never forgot. I lifted my eyes from the letter. Alexander. He stood there, visibly broken, but full of years of accumulated hatred I never understood. And the letter confirmed it. Alexander knew before you did. He overheard a conversation of mine. He grew up believing I destroyed the family. And instead of facing my mistake, I let him carry that weight alone. He turned pain into anger, and anger into poison. I failed him, and I failed you. Only someone very sick or very cowardly would wait until death to do what should have been done in life. I was both. My sons learned to hate you because I was too proud to admit my guilt and too weak to defend you. I stopped. I couldn't breathe. Harold placed a hand on my shoulder, gentle, respectful, like he was steadying cracked porcelain. I kept going. Vivian knew, too. She used it to manipulate the boys. She used the past to make you look like the enemy, to isolate you, to destroy you, and I let her. If there is someone responsible for all of this, that someone is me. My eyes burned. My throat ached, but I continued. And that's why I left everything to you. Not as payment, not as punishment, but as reparation. It's the only way I found to try to fix, even late, what I broke. I know it's not enough. Nothing will be. But please, Eleanor, don't let them kill you again with the silence I created. Speak, shout, tell the story, and live with eternal love and infinite guilt. Edgar. When I finished, no one moved. The air felt heavy as lead, like the ceiling was about to collapse. Alexander was crying, not silent tears, but sobs tearing out of his chest. And he said, through clenched teeth and despair, I always thought it was your fault that Mom almost left. I thought you ruined everything, my whole life. I hated you for what I thought you did. And he let me believe it. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see hatred. I saw a lost child, too grown, too wounded, poisoned by a lie too big. But before I could speak, Vivian screamed, don't believe that letter. This is manipulation. It's fake. It's a made-up sob story so she can be the victim. You think anyone's going to fall for that tragic nonsense? I walked toward her slowly, without rush, the letter still in my hand. There's one thing you still don't understand, Vivian. She glared at me with feral hatred. I continued. A lie needs silence to survive. Truth only needs air. And then I said the sentence that sealed the fate of that room, and right now, the air is all on my side. Vivian froze. Alexander went silent. Elliot stepped beside me and placed his hand on mine. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel alone. The truth was out. The war now had a name and a face, and the entire country was watching. And I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If they tried to bury me, they forgot I'm a seed. When the clock struck 6:30 p.m., the mansion was as silent as a wake, but not the wake of death, a wake of masks. Alexander had stormed out, slamming doors, shouting that I was going to ruin everything. Vivian disappeared somewhere in the house, talking frantically on the phone with someone who sounded just as desperate as she was. Elliot stayed near me, pacing like he was guarding something sacred. The interview would begin at 7 p.m. The news van was already waiting at the gate. My heart beat fast, not with fear, but with purpose, because in that moment, I wasn't speaking just for myself. I was speaking for thousands of women quietly buried by their own families. I grabbed my black coat, the same one I wore to the funeral, and fixed my hair in the mirror. I didn't put on makeup. I didn't hide the lines on my face. I didn't need to look young. I needed to look true. When I was about to head out, Elliot grabbed my arm. Mom, are you sure you want to do this? I looked at him. He looked like a little boy again, wide-eyed, scared, searching for solid ground. It's not about wanting, son. It's about needing. If I stay silent now, all of this will have been for nothing. He took a deep breath and nodded. I'm going with you. You don't have to. This isn't your responsibility. He shook his head. Steady this time. It is. It is now. I'm not running anymore. I placed my hand over his. Then, let's go together. The lights outside were so bright they looked like emergency beacons. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Reporters ran everywhere. Women held signs. Respect mothers. No woman gets erased from her own story. Hashtag Team Eleanor. I wasn't prepared for any of it. My whole body trembled. Some women cried when they saw me passing. One older woman grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Thank you. You're speaking for all of us. My heart overflowed. When I entered the studio, the host, Jessica Monroe, greeted me with a look filled with steadiness and compassion. Eleanor, we're ready. This will be live to the entire country. I'm ready to, I said. And I've waited long enough. Before stepping on stage, Jessica pulled me aside and whispered, Alexander and Vivian's legal team requested airtime for an official statement. They're going to try to discredit you, Liv. I lifted my chin. Good. Let them speak while looking me in the eyes this time. She smiled, surprised. You know what I noticed, Eleanor? You don't look like someone fighting for money. You look like someone fighting for her soul. I breathed deeply, because that's exactly what this is. The curtains opened. White lights, silent audience. Cameras pointed at me like weapons and salvation all at once. Jessica began, Good evening, America. Tonight, we welcome Eleanor Whitmore, at the center of a case that has taken national proportions. Dragged out of her own husband's funeral, publicly labeled a family disgrace, she now speaks for the first time. Eleanor, the whole country wants to hear you. I looked straight into the camera, as if thousands of women were staring back through the lens, and I began. I was expelled from my husband's funeral, dragged out like garbage in front of a packed church, humiliated by my own sons, and accused of crimes I never committed. The audience held its breath, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because thousands of women live this same story in silence, and I'm done being an accomplice to my own pain. Jessica looked at me, moved. Eleanor, what really happened that day? I inhaled and spoke with surgical clarity. A family tried to erase me, to steal what they never built. They used lies, manipulation, and emotional violence to make me believe I had no worth. But what they forgot is that dignity can't be stolen. Dignity is defended. The audience erupted into applause. But then Jessica announced, we have in the studio tonight, waiting to speak, Vivian Hell Whitmore and Alexander Whitmore, who say they have their own version of events. The audience murmured. I stayed completely still. The side door opened. Vivian walked in first, pale, but still trying to wear her plastic smile. Alexander followed, shaken, but hardened by shame. They approached the podium. Jessica took a steady breath and asked, Vivian Alexander, what do you have to say in light of what the entire country has seen? Vivian stepped up to the microphone, eyes cold. We just want to say that all of this is a lie. She manipulated our father, took advantage of his illness. She destroyed our family and now wants to destroy our name. I remained quiet. I let her speak. She needed the rope she'd eventually hang herself with. Jessica turned to me. Eleanor, your response. I looked at the camera and spoke without raising my voice by even a fraction. I don't need to say anything, because I'm not the one who's going to speak now. I signaled with my hand. The screen behind us lit up, and Edgar's recording began to play. The real bomb. Inheritance isn't a right. Inheritance is a consequence. If anyone tries to remove my wife from the funeral, they'll be violating my final wish. I leave everything to her, because she held my life together when I wanted to give up. And to those who choose cruelty and ingratitude, I leave nothing. And then, the final blow. Vivian, stop manipulating my sons. You are destroying everything. Eleanor does not deserve to be punished for my mistakes. Vivian turned chalk-white. Alexander started crying again. The audience was stunned. Jessica was speechless. And I finished. I didn't come here to take anything from anyone. I came to return the truth to where it was stolen from. If anyone destroyed this family, it wasn't me. It was the lies. I lifted my head and delivered the sentence that would become a national headline. No one has the right to bury a woman alive. The audience rose to its feet. Applause, tears, shaking cameras, and I felt physically the weight lift off my body. But just as I was about to breathe, a producer rushed to Jessica and whispered something in her ear. She went pale. She turned to me with wide, terrified eyes. Eleanor, we've received urgent news. There is something else you need to know, and it will change everything again. The lights flickered, and before any explanation could come, the entire studio was stormed by police. The studio lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, as if the entire ceiling were about to collapse. Cameras shut off instantly. The audience fell into absolute silence. And then, like a shockwave, the side door burst open, slamming against the wall. 6 police officers entered dark uniforms, rigid posture, hands resting on their holsters. The sound of their boots echoed across the bright floor like hammers striking metal. Jessica Monroe covered her mouth. The camera operators froze. Vivian turned so pale she looked sculpted from porcelain. The commanding officer spoke loudly and clearly, without hesitation. Connecticut State Police, we have a court order. My heart lurched violently. For a moment that felt endless, I thought they had come for me. I knew that tactic well. When they can't destroy your truth, they try to destroy your image. But then the officer held up a folder and announced, voice slicing through the air, we are here to arrest Vivian Hale Whitmore. The world stopped, and then it exploded. The audience started murmuring and then screaming. Cameras switched back on in a frenzy. Jessica clutched her chest, and Vivian, for the first time since the day I met her, had no words. She tried to laugh, a hysterical, cracked, airless laugh. This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake. But the commander continued, solid as stone. You are being arrested for financial fraud, corporate misappropriation of funds, contractual forgery, and unlawful interference in a legal document, and also under suspicion of tampering with the medical treatment of Mr. Edgar Whitmore. The final charge hit the studio like a missile. I felt my blood freeze. Tampering with his medical treatment. This was far worse than I ever imagined. Vivian tried to take 2 steps back, but the officers closed in immediately. I want a lawyer. You have no proof. This is a circus. The commander didn't even blink. We have bank records, phone recordings, and intercepted messages. And we have the medical team's signed reports, indicating external interference in Edgar Whitmore's medication protocol. My knees nearly gave out. Interference in his medication. Interference in his medication. My stomach twisted. My legs weakened. It felt like death whispering in my ear again. Elliot grabbed my arm and held me up. Vivian lost control and screamed with feral rage. You ruined everything, Eleanor. You were his nightmare. I only did what he wanted. I walked toward her slowly, deliberately, feeling both weight and fire in each step. I stopped less than a hand's distance from her face, and I asked, did you hasten Edgar's death? My voice was a strand of steel. She breathed hard, shaking, and then spat the sentence that erased any doubt. I only gave the final push. The room screamed. Jessica broke into tears. Elliot covered his mouth. I closed my eyes, and I answered not with rage, not with fury, but with the cold calm of someone who already crossed hell and came back. You didn't take his life, Vivian. He was already dying, but you stole his right to say goodbye. The officer snapped handcuffs around her wrists. She turned to Alexander, desperate. Alex, say something. Don't let them do this to me. He looked at her, and for the first time, I saw no tenderness, no love, no loyalty. What I saw was disgust. You killed my father. Vivian was dragged out amid screams, flashes, chaos, and when the doors slammed behind her, silence returned heavy but clean. I took a deep breath. Then the officer approached me. Mrs. Whitmore, we're sorry, but we'll need you at the station tomorrow for an official statement. And the medical examiner has reopened the case. Your husband's body will be exhumed. The words sliced through my soul like a blade. I never imagined pain could have so many layers, and for the first time in this entire war, I broke inside. Elliot held me up. The whole audience stood, many crying. Jessica came closer and took my hands. Eleanor, if you want to stop the interview here, we will. I inhaled deeply and said, with a voice unshaken and indestructible, I won't stop. Not until the entire truth is on the table. I was thrown out of my husband's funeral. Now I will go to the end for his life, and for mine. The audience erupted in applause. Lights, screams, flashes, but deep in my chest, there was only one certainty. The war wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The day of the exhumation dawned gray. Not the soft, winter kind, but the heavy gray of a storm that doesn't ask for permission to fall. I stared at my hands while waiting for the official transport. They trembled, not from fear, but from a weight no word could describe. Anyone who hasn't lived it doesn't understand. There are pains that go beyond the skin, pains that pierce soul and bone at the same time. Burying the man you love once is almost impossible. Burying him twice is a kind of torture that shouldn't exist among the living. When the black car stopped at the gate, Elliot was ready, dark coat, red eyes, looking like he hadn't slept at all. I'm going with you, Mom. I touched his hand. I know. Alexander was in the living room, sitting on the couch, his head buried in his hands. He looked devastated. I had never seen him like that, not truly broken since he was a child. I walked to him slowly. He lifted his eyes, red, swollen, empty. I didn't know, Mom, I swear. I didn't know what she did to Dad. I just thought he hated you. I thought you'd ruined everything. A part of my chest opened, not like a wound, but like a window letting in new air. You didn't hate me, Alexander. You were trying to survive a pain you didn't know how to name. He collapsed into tears. I was a monster to you. I held his face between my hands. Children aren't born monsters. Someone teaches them to be. And someone taught you wrong for years. He cried like a child, like a boy who lost his father long before he died, like a son who was manipulated until he became a weapon. I touched my forehead to his and said, if you really want to apologize, start with something simple. Don't lie anymore. Not to me, not to yourself. He nodded, sobbing. When we stood up, I saw something new in him. The hatred was gone. The emptiness had cracked, and a piece of truth had finally returned to its rightful place. We left together. 3 people, a family being born again from dust. Light rain began falling as we arrived at the site. Edgar's casket was there, elevated under tents, surrounded by cold lights and the heavy silence of professionals who know they're dealing with something far greater than science. The medical examiner, Dr. Samuel Bryson, approached with complete respect. Mrs. Whitmore, good morning. I'm sorry we're here like this, but I promise you one thing, the truth will be found, no matter the cost. I simply nodded. There weren't enough words in the world. Alexander stood beside me. Elliot held my hand like an anchor. When the casket was opened, my whole body trembled. I wanted to look. I needed to look, and I did. And in that instant, pain tore through my soul like lightning. But along with it came a courage I never knew existed. No one would speak for Edgar anymore. No one would use his name as a weapon. I would fight for him until the very last second. After a long moment of respectful silence, Dr. Bryson called us closer. We found something that wasn't in the original report. My stomach tightened. He inhaled and said, there were traces of a substance that wasn't part of the prescribed medication. Elliot squeezed my hand. Alexander swallowed hard. The world seemed to contract into a single second. It's a combination of sedatives that would have accelerated respiratory failure. It could only have been administered manually, by someone very close to the patient. He looked at us with absolute gravity. Your husband didn't die only from the illness. He was helped to die. My soul left my body for an instant. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't hypothesis. It wasn't rumor. It was fact. My voice came out low, but hard as steel. Did Vivian do this? Dr. Bryson didn't answer directly. Professionals never accuse without the final signature. But he said enough without saying the words. All signs point to external administration during supervised visits, and someone with privileged access to his file altered information after his death. Alexander covered his mouth, suffocating. She killed Dad, and I helped her without knowing. I held him. You didn't kill anyone, Alexander. You were manipulated. We all were. Then, like thunder after lightning, Dr. Bryson added, there's something else. We looked at him again. We found old marks on his heart, scars from a previous cardiac arrest, one that was never documented in any medical report. My own heart stopped for a moment. A previous cardiac arrest. When? How? Why? Elliot whispered, barely audible. It happened before, didn't it? And in that instant, a memory flashed like a blade. The year of the affair, the year of the dead baby, the year Edgar disappeared for 3 days and came back shattered. Dr. Bryson confirmed. We estimate it occurred around 26 years ago. 26 years, exactly before Elliot was born. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I understood everything. Edgar hadn't survived the death of the other baby. He died emotionally, and almost physically, and came back as another man. But someone knew that. Someone used it. Someone kept that information like a knife. Elliot inhaled sharply and said, voice trembling with shock, Mom, there's someone else in this story. Someone besides Vivian, someone who knew from the beginning. I looked at him. He looked at Alexander. And Alexander, eyes wide in panic and late understanding, whispered, Uncle Richard. My world spun. Edgar's brother, the man who always appeared as the savior in the worst moments, the man who always hated me being in the family, the man who always said I would never be enough, the man who took control of the business when Edgar got sick. And suddenly, everything made sense. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just manipulation. It was inherited power. It was control. It was dirty money hiding behind a clean facade. And above all, it was premeditation. I felt a fire rise from my stomach to my chest. No more mourning. No more silent pain. This was open war. And I spoke without a single tremor in my voice. I'm going to uncover everything. I'll dig up every lie you tried to bury with my husband's body. And I'll end every last person who tried to kill the truth. The rain started falling harder, as if the sky had decided to spill the weight I'd been carrying. And then, looking at Edgar's open casket, I said the sentence that changed everything inside me. I didn't lose my husband. I lost the truth of his story. Now I'm taking it back, even if it's the last thing I ever do. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't burying Edgar. I was unburying the truth. And no one would stop me. When we left the cemetery, the sky finally collapsed. The rain poured down heavy and violent, as if it wanted to wash the earth clean of sins left buried too long. In the car, no one spoke for several minutes. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, it was war silence. The silence of people who had just realized everything they knew about their lives was a lie. I stared out the window, watching trees blur behind sheets of rain, feeling like I was watching a movie, the kind of movie where you realize, far too late, that you trusted the wrong person. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. The voice that responded was deep, slow, calculated, the voice of a man who speaks rarely, but never accidentally. Don't get involved in what you shouldn't, Eleanor. My entire body froze. I would recognize that voice anywhere on earth. Richard Whitmore, Edgar's older brother, cold as stone, ambitious as poison. The kind of man who believes there's nothing more powerful than a last name and that any life is disposable if it interferes with business. You're late, Richard, I replied without hesitation. I'm already involved, and now I'm going all the way. He laughed, not an amused laugh, but a dead, soulless one. You think you stand a chance against me. You spent 50 years living in my brother's shadow. Now you want to play hero. I kept my voice solid as granite. I'm not playing. I want justice. He went on, too confident, too arrogant. Justice. There's no justice without power. And you don't have any. Funny, I answered. The whole country seems to disagree. Silence. He hadn't expected me to strike back. You're making a fatal mistake, Eleanor. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know the whole story. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply. Then enlighten me, Richard, because everything I've uncovered so far points straight to you. The company started bleeding money 6 months before Edgar died. You took control when he got sick and used that time to hide criminal financial activity. And when you realized he wanted the company back, wanted to expose you, someone decided to speed up his death. Richard inhaled not with fear, but with calculation. Watch what you're insinuating. I'm not insinuating, I replied. I'm proving. And I hung up. The silence inside the car turned electrical live, vibrating, ready to explode. Alexander stared at me, stunned. How did you know? I looked at him through the rearview mirror. Because I lived with your father for over 50 years, Alexander Ina. And if there's one thing I learned about men with secrets, it's this. Elliot finished the sentence like a revelation breaking open. No one keeps a secret alone, Ian continued, voice trembling. Uncle Richard was with Dad at the hospital. He had access to the medical files. He visited during restricted hours. He always said he was handling business. He knew everything about the medication. Alexander dropped his head into his hand, crushed. My God. And I trusted him. I trusted him more than I trusted you, Mom. I was such an idiot. I touched his hand. You were a son trying to believe someone who pretended to protect you. Don't blame yourself for loving the wrong person. Blame yourself only if you stay wrong now. He swallowed and nodded. Then, for the first time in his life, he asked, Mom, what do we do now? I didn't even need to think. Now we take down the man who hid behind your father's coffin. Now we expose the name that thought it was bigger than the truth. Now we turned the game around. Back at the mansion, we gathered in the main living room. The house felt different. It wasn't the place where I had been humiliated. It was the place where I was beginning to rebuild. Harold the attorney was already waiting with a stack of files and a laptop. He opened the folder. I investigated everything you mentioned. And you were right. Richard controlled all company accounts in the last months. He opened parallel funds overseas, manipulated contracts, and there are million-dollar transfers in his name and Vivian's. Alexander slammed his hand on the table. Son of a... I stopped him. This isn't the time for insults. This is the time for strategy. Harold breathed in and continued. I have enough to request a judicial freeze of all Richard's assets, but we'll need something stronger to take him down completely. An internal witness, someone who worked with him, someone who knows what happened behind closed doors. And at that exact moment, the doorbell rang. We all looked at each other. The atmosphere tightened. Alexander stood up slowly and walked to the door. When he opened it, we all froze. A woman stood there, thin, hollow-eyed, wearing simple clothes, older than she should have been, like someone who had carried more pain than a body can hold. She stepped forward and said, her voice cracked but steady, My name is Catherine Price. I'm Helena's sister, and I have things you need to hear. Because Edgar wasn't the first man Richard tried to destroy. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I could only ask one thing, my voice nearly breaking. Why come now? She took a long breath and answered, because I was buried too. And when I saw you rise, I knew it was time for me to rise as well. Then, she spoke the sentence that opened the door to the final secret. Helena didn't lose the baby because of the delivery. Richard paid someone to induce early labor, because the baby would have made Edgar independent from him. Richard killed my nephew. The world stopped breathing, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clean fury, lethal fury, righteous fury. And I spoke not to the living, but to the man whose truth I was fighting for. I promise you, Edgar, I'm going all the way. Not even God will stop me. Catherine walked in slowly, like someone carrying an invisible body on her back. Her steps were small and cautious, as if the floor could collapse at any moment. But her eyes, beneath the exhaustion, grief, and decades of loss, held the strength of someone who had crossed hell and returned with a map. Respect rose in me instantly. Alexander brought her a chair. Elliot offered water. Harold cleared the table like he was preparing an altar. I sat across from her. Catherine, we're ready to hear whatever you came to tell. She nodded, breathed deeply, and began. My sister Helena was a good woman, a very good one, the kind who didn't know how to hate anyone. She loved Edgar the way few people ever love anyone, and he loved her too. I'm not here to deny that. I'm not here to sanctify anyone. I'm here to tell the truth. I listened, thinking, When she got pregnant, they planned to tell you first, Eleanor, then the rest of the family. Edgar was going to take responsibility and end what he called a life built on lies with you. He said he'd been deceiving himself for years and needed to start over. The words hit my chest like blows. They weren't new, but hearing them without anesthesia hurt in a different way, and I let it hurt. I needed to, Catherine went on. But Richard found out. And unlike Edgar, he had nothing to lose and everything to gain. If Edgar divorced you, half the company would go to you, and Richard would lose the control he'd always had over his brother. I saw Alexander flinch. Elliot shut his eyes tight. Harold wrote furiously, as if recording a verdict. Richard went to my sister, offered her money to disappear. She refused. She said she wouldn't raise a child hidden like a sin. That's when he did something monstrous. Catherine began to cry, not fragile tears, old tears, heavy ones, locked away for decades. We waited. Respectfully, silently. He paid a doctor to trigger early labor on illegal procedure. He said it was to avoid scandal and protect the Whitmore name. But the baby didn't survive, and Helena almost died with him. Her voice broke. She was never the same again. And Edgar wasn't either. Silence fell like iron. I felt the ground vanish beneath me. It was a pain beyond naming. Not anger. Not sadness. Retroactive grief. Grief for a life that never existed. For a love I never saw. For a version of Edgar I never met. Did Edgar know Richard did it? I asked, fighting for steadiness. Catherine nodded slowly. He found out shortly before you reconciled, but he believed no one would believe him. He thought telling the truth would destroy everyone. So he chose silence. I closed my eyes, and everything snapped into place. His silence killed us. His silence killed Helena. His silence killed the baby. His silence nearly killed me. And now I finally understood what Edgar meant when he wrote, "I was too much of a coward to protect the ones who needed me most." When I opened my eyes again, Catherine continued, "Richard destroyed my family, and he destroyed yours too. But he didn't expect the truth to survive this long. And now it's here, and it has a name." She took an aged envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. "This is a recording. Helena made it weeks before the delivery. She explains everything, and she names names." Harold picked the envelope up carefully like it was explosive. Alexander covered his face with both hands. Elliot cried silently, like someone discovering the world was bigger and crueler than he ever imagined. And something rose inside me, not revenge, justice. I stood, and with the firmest voice of my life, said, "Richard Whitmore tried to bury the truth, but truth isn't a body. Truth doesn't rot. Now we're exhuming more than my husband. We're exhuming the entire story." Catherine looked at me with deep respect. "I knew you were the right woman for this fight." Helena always said, "One day, someone will stand." And today, that day came. I touched her hand. "Thank you for not letting the world forget her baby. I won't let anyone forget either." She smiled, a fragile, enormous smile at the same time. And then I said, "Now let's bring down an empire." The next morning, we woke to a country in shock. The funeral video had already passed 4 million views. Hashtags dominated the internet. Hashtag justice for Eleanor. Hashtag take down Richard Whitmore. Hashtag no one buries AM other. It was as if a dam had burst. Harold set the laptop on the table and asked, "Are you ready to release Helena's video?" I took a deep breath. There was no turning back. We're ending the era of silence. Catherine plugged the flash drive into the USB port with trembling hands, and the video began. The image was simpler, small room, dim lighting, Helena sitting on a bed. Her eyes were deep, devastated, but brave. "My name is Helena Price. I'm recording this because I fear for my baby's life." My heart tightened. "The father is Edgar Whitmore. We love each other. He wants to take responsibility, to tell the truth. But his brother, Richard, says I'm a problem that needs to disappear. He offered me money. I refused. Now he's threatening to force the pregnancy early. If anything happens to me, or my baby, it was him. Richard Whitmore." Absolute silence. Even the air seemed to stop. Helena took one last breath and finished. "If this recording reaches the world, it means I didn't survive. Save Edgar. And don't let anyone lie for him." When the video ended, no one could speak. Alexander dragged both hands over his face in shock. "My God, my uncle killed that baby." Catherine cried with dignity, and all I could say was, "It's time." Harold uploaded it to the press and social media. 5 minutes later, notifications blew up. Breaking. Video implicates Richard Whitmore in historic crime investigation into attempted homicide reopened. Protests scheduled at state courthouse. Public outrage had turned into movement. Then the phone rang again, this time an official number. I answered. The cold voice returned. You think you've won? You just declared war, Eleanor, I replied with icy calm. No, I just opened the right coffin this time, he growled. I'm going to destroy you. You can try, but now the whole country is against you. I hung up. When I turned, Alexander was looking at me like he was seeing someone reborn. Mom, I've never been so proud in my life. Elliot smiled through tears. Catherine took my hand, and for the first time in days, sunlight broke through the clouds. Something bloomed inside me. Rebirth. The battle was far from over, but the fear had switched sides. From that moment on, I was no longer the victim, I was the voice, and I knew exactly what to do: turn story into justice, and justice into legacy. 2 days later, the state courthouse was unrecognizable. More than 3,000 people filled the street with signs, cameras, flags, voices united. Justice for Eleanor. Take down Richard. No one buries a woman alive. When I arrived, the sound was deafening, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Elliot gave me his arm. Alexander walked at my side, head hyphenly, on the right side of the story. We entered the courthouse with the weight of truth behind us. Inside the hearing room, Richard was already there, perfectly dressed, expensive suit, poisonous stare. But there was something new in him: fear. He stood first, speaking with the voice of a man too used to power. Eleanor Whitmore is an opportunist, a manipulator. She wants to destroy the Whitmore legacy and steal what was never hers. Cameras rolled. The entire country watched live. I walked to the microphone, held it firmly. I didn't destroy the Whitmore legacy. I discovered it was rotten. A murmur crossed the room. And if it's in ruins now, it's because you built it on top of corpses. Literally. Richard laughed with disdain. Baseless accusations. Harold lifted a folder. We have proof: bank records, illegal transfers, and intercepted messages between you and the doctor who administered unauthorized substances to Mr. Edgar Whitmore. Silence. Then Catherine rose. Slow steps, earthquake strength, and I have my sister's voice. She looked straight at Richard and he went pale. You killed her baby, and you killed her spirit, and now you will answer for it. The judge called for order, then announced, this court accepts the video as evidence and grants a warrant for the immediate arrest of Mr. Richard Whitmore. The room erupted. Police entered. Handcuffs flashed. And Richard, first time in his life, lost control. You think you've won, Eleanor. I still have power. Nothing ends here. I walked right up to him, staring him down. You're right. Nothing ends here. This is where it finally begins. He was taken away under boos, cameras, and tears. And in that moment, I felt the entire world shift. Days later, the judicial ruling came out. All of Richard's assets and those tied to the fraudulent company were frozen. The case was moved to federal court. I was granted full legal ownership of Edgar's entire estate, and his name was cleared before the entire country. When the judge finished speaking, I closed my eyes and whispered, "You can rest now, Edgar." And for the first time in years, I felt peace. The mansion was no longer a battlefield. It was home again. I transformed the main hall into an institute for women who had been wronged, offering basic legal education, emotional support, and tools to rebuild their lives. At the inauguration, standing before hundreds of women, I said, an inheritance isn't money. Inheritance is dignity, and dignity must be defended. Elliot held my hand. Alexander cried beside me. Catherine smiled, carrying Helena alive in her heart. And when the rain began to fall outside, a soft, clean rain, so different from the one on the day of the exhumation, I felt the world washing away what remained of the pain, and I thought, they tried to bury me. They forgot I was a seed, and now, I have bloomed. It ended, not with a loud victory, but with the quiet of peace, with truth, with dignity, with rebirth, and the whole world saw. And that's how I finished telling my story. Now I want to know, what would your reaction have been? Tell me in the comments below. I want to thank this channel, Buried by Family, for giving me space to share this part of my life, a story I carried in silence for far too long. This channel needs your support to keep bringing stories like this one, stories of truth, courage, and survival. So please, click the subscribe button. When you do, you help make sure that other women will also be able to share their truths here. Thank you for being here. On the screen now, you'll see another video you may want to watch next, and the icon to subscribe to the channel. I hope you stay with us.